The night felt different from the moment it began, as if the walls of the Harper house were holding their breath, and Emily Harper sensed it while standing alone in the kitchen, rinsing a coffee mug she never finished, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of her husband Daniel's voice laughing earlier than she had heard him laugh in months, not with her, but with his old friend Michael Reed, who had arrived unexpectedly just before dinner with a tired smile and a travel bag slung over his shoulder, bringing with him a past that felt oddly alive. Emily tried to remind herself it was just a visit, just a few days, nothing more, yet something in her chest tightened as she watched the two men talk in the living room, Daniel animated and relaxed in a way she had almost forgotten, while she moved quietly around them, setting plates, offering drinks, smiling when spoken to, feeling like a guest in her own home. And as the evening went on, the conversation stayed light, but her thoughts grew heavy, drifting back to the slow distance that had grown between her and Daniel over the last year, the late nights, the short answers, the way they shared a bed but not their worries anymore, and she wondered when love had turned into routine without either of them noticing. Michael, on the other hand, noticed everything, or so it seemed to Emily, the way he thanked her sincerely for dinner, the way he asked about her work and waited for the answer, not glancing at his phone, not interrupting. And she told herself that kindness should not feel rare in a marriage, yet it did, and that truth unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. When the night finally settled and Daniel showed Michael to the guest room, Emily retreated to her bedroom with a book she didn't read, changing into pajamas slowly, her movements careful, her mind restless, and when Daniel joined her later, already half asleep, he kissed her forehead without opening his eyes and turned away. And she lay there beside him feeling the space between their backs like a quiet ocean. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time felt unclear as the house fell silent except for the ticking clock in the hallway, and Emily stared at the ceiling, counting shadows, wondering why sleep avoided her so stubbornly, when suddenly a soft sound reached her ears, footsteps, careful and unsure, moving down the hallway, and her heart reacted before her mind could, beating faster as the sound paused. Then continued, then stopped again, closer now, and she sat up slightly, listening, telling herself it was nothing, that houses make noise at night, that guests get lost in unfamiliar homes, but still she felt a strange pull of awareness, a sense that this night was leaning towards something unknown. Earlier that evening, she had caught Michael watching her as she spoke, not in a way that felt wrong, but in a way that felt present, and that memory returned now, uninvited, blending with the sound of footsteps and the quiet breathing of her husband beside her, and she felt a wave of confusion wash over her, guilt mixed with longing for something she could not yet name, and she reminded herself firmly of who she was, a wife, a woman who valued loyalty, who believed lines existed for a reason, yet belief did not erase emotion, and emotion did not ask permission. The footsteps grew clearer, then stopped right outside her door, and in that stillness, Emily felt the full weight of the moment press down on her. The night thick with questions she had avoided for too long, about her marriage, her loneliness, and the version of herself she had slowly lost while trying to keep everything peaceful. She thought of opening the door, then thought of not opening it, and both choices felt equally heavy, because doing nothing was no longer an option, and as she sat there, breath held, the house seemed to wait with her, unaware that a single knock, or even silence, could quietly change the direction of 3 lives. And in that suspended moment, before anything truly happened, Emily understood that some nights are not loud or dramatic, but they still leave a mark, beginning not with action, but with awareness, and as a soft knock finally touched the door, barely louder than a thought, the night crossed a line that could never be unseen. Michael's hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment longer than he intended, caught between a sense of duty and the unspoken tension that had grown in the house that evening, and when he finally knocked softly, the sound was almost swallowed by the quiet hum of the night, a faint echo that made Emily's heart skip in a way she didn't understand, and when she opened the door just a crack, her tired face framed by the soft light of the bedside lamp, Michael felt a sudden rush of something he hadn't anticipated, an awareness that this was more than a casual check-in, that standing here, at this threshold, was a choice that carried weight far beyond the simple concern of a friend checking on someone, and he hurried to explain, his voice low and careful. I thought I heard you moving. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, words that sounded too ordinary for the electricity in the air, and Emily studied him silently for a moment, noticing the way his eyes carried attention, how he waited without forcing conversation, and something inside her shifted, a recognition of being truly seen that she hadn't felt in years, that she hadn't felt from Daniel in months. And despite the late hour and the boundaries she knew should exist, she stepped aside just enough to let him enter. The door remaining partly open, a space between them charged with an unspoken tension that made her stomach flutter and her mind race with questions she didn't dare speak aloud. They remained apart, careful, almost painfully aware of the line between them, and yet the air itself seemed to carry their unsaid thoughts, filling the room with a presence heavier than mere bodies. As Emily sat on the edge of her bed, tucking her legs under her, while Michael lingered near the doorway, his posture tense but restrained, every movement deliberate, aware that the distance mattered more than proximity, and the quiet gave way to the start of conversation, first small, almost meaningless phrases, about how the day had gone, about the noise of the street outside, yet beneath each word lay a subtle current of something deeper, an emotional magnet pulling at both of them, a recognition of shared loneliness and attention that neither had expected but both secretly needed. And as Michael listened genuinely and without interruption, Emily felt her chest open slightly, a space she had closed off to the world and to her husband, a space that had grown over time, slowly, as she felt more invisible than seen, more unheard than understood, and the act of being listened to so intently made the room feel warmer, safer, yet undeniably complicated, and she realized that the presence of Michael, the careful attention in his gaze, was making her confront desires and fears she had buried beneath daily routines, under smiles and obligations. She spoke, almost in a whisper, about the loneliness she felt despite having Daniel beside her, about the small moments of invisibility that had accumulated over months into a quiet ache, and Michael didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, he just nodded and responded with understanding, recounting his own experiences, the roads not taken in his life, moments of regret and longing, his voice steady but soft, a mirror to her own feelings, and as their words intertwined, laughter rose unexpectedly at small shared memories and stories from years before, innocent anecdotes about college days, mutual friends, and life's unpredictable turns, and the sound of that laughter broke the tension just enough to let them breathe, but not enough to erase the awareness of what was unfolding. They spoke of dreams and disappointments, of things left unsaid in their lives, and Emily found herself leaning forward slightly, compelled to share more than she intended, feeling a trust that was rare, fragile, and entirely unplanned, and Michael, too, felt the pull, the need to remain, to stay in this small bubble of honesty and care, yet he understood the rules that must exist, the boundaries that could not be crossed, and his restraint added a weight to his presence, a quiet tension that made every glance, every small movement, feel meaningful, charged with possibility but tempered by respect. And both of them were acutely aware that the moment could shift irrevocably with a single misstep. Michael finally moved toward the door, signaling the inevitable end of their private moment, and Emily, her voice soft but steady, thanked him for staying, for listening, for noticing her in a way that had been absent for far too long, and their eyes met, lingering, searching for understanding, for acknowledgement of the unspoken connection that neither could name, and in that brief, suspended gaze, they recognized a truth they had not anticipated: emotional closeness can exist without touch, can linger in glances and words, can build a tension that feels almost unbearable, and yet it is also fleeting, fragile, and delicate, a gift they both understood could not be stretched too far without consequence. And as Michael stepped back into the hallway, closing the door behind him with deliberate care, Emily pressed a hand to her chest, feeling a mixture of relief, loss, and something indefinable stirring within her, knowing that the night had shifted something inside her, that she had glimpsed an emotional intimacy that was rare, dangerous, and profoundly affecting. And in the hall, Michael paused, hand on the doorknob, taking a breath, aware that the memory of this night would stay with him, with her, in the quiet spaces of their lives, leaving questions unanswered, hearts aware, and lives forever marked by the delicate balance of connection and restraint. A night that began with a soft knock and ended with a door closing quietly, but neither of them would ever forget the weight and intensity of the moments shared in the stillness of Emily's room. The air between Emily and Michael seemed to hum even after the door closed, a quiet tension lingering in her room that neither could shake, and though Michael had retreated to the hallway, the memory of their conversation pressed heavily on both of them, filling the spaces where silence had once lived. making Emily sit back on her bed with a restless awareness of every thought, every heartbeat, while Michael paused just outside, hand still near the doorknob, reluctant to walk away because leaving felt like abandoning the rare connection they had stumbled upon, and the strange intimacy of the night pressed on them both, the kind that doesn't need words to exist, a closeness built from attention, understanding, and subtle vulnerability that had been absent in Emily's marriage for too long. They both knew the rules, yet the rules felt brittle, almost like paper against the storm of emotions that had begun to swell between them, and when Emily spoke again, her voice low and cautious, she asked questions not for answers but for acknowledgement, asking if Michael had ever felt completely unseen, and he nodded, sharing glimpses of his own hidden loneliness, the sacrifices made for family and work, the quiet regret of life paths chosen or ignored, and the conversation deepened quickly, moving from casual topics into territory that felt private, important, and raw, the kind of discussion that can make one feel exposed yet understood simultaneously, a strange duality that left them both breathless yet grateful. Laughter rose unexpectedly, sharp and light, as they recalled small memories from college and past friendships, innocent yet comforting, a reminder of simpler times when life hadn't felt so heavy, and each laugh, each smile, pulled them closer emotionally, a gravitational force neither could resist, making proximity more meaningful and silence more significant, and as the moments stretched, Emily realized she had been holding back parts of herself for years, parts that Michael's attention now coaxed into the light, and she spoke of hopes deferred, of the quiet ache of routine, of moments lost to distraction and neglect, while Michael listened with an intensity that surprised him, aware that simply being present could be powerful, transformative, and yet dangerous in its implications. The room felt smaller as their conversation unfolded, the distance between them shrinking without movement. Emotional closeness threading through every sentence, every glance, creating a fabric of intimacy that was almost tangible, and though neither of them reached out physically, the connection was undeniable, leaving them acutely aware of the fragile boundary they were treading, and Michael knew he had to leave, knew that staying would blur lines he could not afford to cross, yet he hesitated, struggling against the pull that made stepping away feel like betrayal of something unspoken, of something real. Emily sensed his movement, the shift in posture, the quiet breath before he turned, and instinctively, she whispered a word of thanks, a simple phrase carrying the weight of months of loneliness and longing, and when Michael looked back at her, eyes locking with hers, the intensity of the moment struck them both, a recognition of the emotional storm swirling in the room, a storm created without touch, without action, but entirely alive in its impact, leaving them suspended in a space of awareness and possibility, a liminal zone between what was right and what felt inevitable. For a few moments, they simply stared, absorbing the gravity of the connection, the shared understanding that neither intended but both felt deeply, and in that gaze, Michael saw the vulnerability she had guarded so carefully, the tenderness hidden beneath routine and obligation, while Emily saw the sincerity and restraint in him, the acknowledgement of lines respected even as emotions surged. And the weight of this recognition settled over them, quiet but heavy, almost painful in its clarity, as they realized that some bonds form instantly yet linger indefinitely, shaping choices, thoughts, and hearts long after the moment passes. Finally, Michael stepped back toward the door, moving slowly, deliberately, aware that every inch carried significance, and Emily, feeling the finality of his departure, pressed a hand to her chest, her body tense, heart racing, aware of relief and loss mingling, the strange satisfaction of being truly seen, and the discomfort of knowing that such attention came with consequences she could not yet name, and as the door clicked softly behind him, he paused in the hallway, hand on the knob one last time, breath steadying, aware that the night had shifted something in both of them, a quiet, irreversible change that left hearts heavier, minds fuller, and emotions tangled in ways neither could ignore. Michael left the hallway slowly, carrying the weight of restraint and the memory of eyes that held more than words could convey. While Emily remained on her bed, staring at the shadows cast by the bedside lamp, understanding for the first time in months how much she had craved attention, connection, and understanding that went beyond casual conversation, realizing that what had passed between them was not a betrayal in action but a deep, emotional crossing of boundaries, a gentle, almost innocent infidelity of the heart that neither could undo. The night felt charged with possibilities and warnings, the kind that linger Long after footsteps fade, and both of them, in their separate spaces, carried the echo of laughter, the resonance of shared vulnerability, and the quiet tension of knowing that emotional intimacy can be as powerful as any physical act, shaping hearts, testing limits, and leaving memories that demand reflection, self-awareness, and, ultimately, choices that could define the future of relationships, love, and trust, making that night one that neither Emily nor Michael would ever forget, a night that began with curiosity and ended with restraint, yet left both forever changed, aware of the fragile, potent nature of connection, the allure of attention, and the quiet danger of hearts speaking truths too powerful to ignore. Morning arrived softly, with sunlight spilling through the blinds and brushing the walls of the Harper house in gentle gold, but the quiet calm of the day could not erase the echoes of the night before, a night that had shifted emotions, thoughts, and relationships in subtle yet undeniable ways. And Emily sat at the edge of her bed, tracing patterns on the sheets with her fingers, her mind replaying every word, every glance, every fleeting moment with Michael, realizing that what had happened was not physical betrayal but an emotional crossing of boundaries that left her heart both heavier and more aware. And she noticed how Daniel, already downstairs in the kitchen, stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, the morning light catching the shadows under his eyes. A faint line of worry or perhaps suspicion etched across his forehead, and though he said nothing, Emily could sense a change, a tension that neither spoke aloud, a subtle awareness that the intimacy she had shared, even if only through conversation and unspoken understanding, had left marks visible to those who paid attention. Michael packed his bag quietly in the guest room, his movements deliberate, avoiding the long glance at Emily, careful to respect the fragile balance they had created. Yet both of them felt the gravity of the night pressing against their thoughts, a pull neither could resist in memory. And as he left the house, door closing softly behind him, the silence seemed to settle differently, charged with awareness, with the weight of emotional intimacy that existed without a single inappropriate action, yet undeniably profound, leaving Emily feeling both relief and longing in equal measure, knowing that what they shared would linger in her heart, in her mind, in the way she moved through the day. Daniel, meanwhile, stirred with a sense he could not name, a quiet unease that gnawed at him as he glanced at Emily while she moved about the kitchen, setting breakfast quietly, smiling faintly, yet somehow distant, and he realized that attention and care had been absent from their marriage in ways too subtle to notice until now, and the presence of Michael, even for a short visit, had revealed gaps in their connection, the small cracks where communication and emotional presence had once lived but now only lingered faintly, like a fading echo, and the recognition hit him that neglect, even unintentional, can open doors that no one intends to leave open, doors of thought, emotion, and longing that remain once a guest has quietly entered the heart and left an impression. Emily moved through the morning with careful composure, serving coffee and toast, exchanging polite words with Daniel, yet inside, she wrestled with the swirl of feelings stirred by last night's conversation, the rare attentiveness, the genuine understanding that had made her feel alive in ways she had almost forgotten, and she wondered how a few hours of heartfelt presence could awaken such deep reflection, both grateful for the attention and frightened by its intensity, knowing that while nothing physical had occurred, her heart had undeniably shifted, her awareness heightened, and her view of her marriage subtly altered, leaving her pondering the fragility of love and the consequences of emotional neglect. Michael's departure left a silence that was heavier than emptiness, filled with the memory of laughter, shared confidences, and the intimate, careful listening that had created a bond neither of them sought but both experienced, a bond that existed in glances, words, and presence alone, and Emily felt the ache of that absence immediately, a longing for connection she now recognized had been missing.